you just might be in the melt, my love. Because you can sense the beginning coming, but you still might be in the ending emotionally. Your nervous system is not failing you. It is responding rightfully to conditions that were never designed to be sustainable. Your inner fire doesn't need to blaze to sustain you. Tend the warmth that lasts. You're watching Soft Alchemy with Stevie Renee, a sacred container for transmutation and the quiet return to your inner wisdom. Come breathe with me. Welcome back to Soft Alchemy, family. Today's episode is a little bit different and also very much in the spirit of this space. This is the first of what I am calling seasonal energy check-ins. And these episodes are meant to be collective resets throughout the year. Moments where we pause together at the edge of a new season and we ask ourselves questions like, where am I right now? What is shifting in my life in this moment? And what is this season asking of me? So if you clicked on this video because you're feeling overwhelmed or activated or unsure of how to move forward this spring, we're going to study that together today. This is truly meant to be a resource that you return to as the season unfolds. So I want to invite you to take your time with it. I want to invite you to let it live with you. And to help you orient to the rhythm of these episodes, here is how they will always unfold. We'll start with a seasonal invocation written by moi as a way of naming the energy we're stepping into. Then we'll move through a few affirmations together to help the body and the nervous system meet what's here with gentleness. And finally, we will close with a shared breath to seal it in before arriving fully into the episode. So wherever you are right now, I invite you to settle in. Maybe you pause here to grab a notebook or a journal, maybe even a cup of tea or a card deck to have nearby. And when you're ready, feel free to close your eyes or soften your gaze, and we'll begin with our seasonal invocation. Spring is your sacred return. The thaw, the melt, the moment that life starts moving again. This is the season where what's heavy begins to lighten and what's true gets harder to ignore. May what's ending end with grace. May what's ready begin without force. And may you clear what blocks your life force so the spark in you has room to breathe. This is the slow miracle of coming back to life. And now, with a hand on your heart, you can simply listen or quietly repeat these affirmations. I return to myself gently. I make space for what's awakening in me. I grow at my own pace. My softness becomes my momentum. So let's take one breath together to seal in this moment. Breathing in and out. Allowing the body to soften. And if your eyes were closed, you can gently open them now. And let's begin. So before we get into April specifically, I want to name the larger energetic container that we're in, because I think it helps everything land a little bit more clearly, and I think it matters holistically for how we move through this season. Astrologically speaking, on February 17th, we officially entered the year of the fire horse, according to the Chinese zodiac. This is such a powerful symbol for momentum and courage and forward motion. And at the same time, 2026 is a universal 1 year, which means collectively we're in a new cycle, right? This is a beginning year. This year has a lot of seed year energy. And a numerology peer of mine actually recently shared that the seeds you plant in a 1 year can actually shape what grows over the next 9. So this is a very significant moment in time. And whether you work with numerology or not, I really feel the medicine in that because this energy isn't about pressure. This energy is very much about intention and setting the tone and setting the ground, preparing the ground for the seeds that we're going to plant. So this is a season where small, honest commitments matter so much more than dramatic reinventions, right? So throughout this conversation, I want you to be thinking about one steady decision that you can make this spring. Not 10 decisions, not 5 decisions, but just one. When we last gathered at the end of winter, we talked about that moment after a long period of rest where things begin to shift. And now in April, that shift really becomes visible. The days are getting longer, the colors returning, the flowers are blooming, and the world feels like it's stretching awake after the long sleep that it was in. Now, Ayurvedically speaking, we're still in Kapha season, which carries the qualities of heaviness and moisture and slowness and steadiness, right? That's why the world feels like it's slowly waking up. It's not necessarily jumping into action yet. And what makes this season a little bit confusing is the fact that underneath that slow energy, the fire of spring is also beginning to flicker. So many of us are feeling those two polarities at once. Part of us wants to stay curled up and inward, and part of us is ready to rise up and get outside and show up and show out. In Ayurveda, spring is that moment where the heaviness of winter begins to melt. And that melting can bring congestion, and it can happen physically and emotionally and energetically. So if you have felt foggy or slow or moody or more sensitive to stress, you just might be in the melt, my love. Even though spring symbolizes movement, this season is less about forced movement and more about calibrated movement. So that is, gently kickstarting circulation, reigniting your life force, your prana. Kapha doesn't need to be forced into action. It needs a gentle nudge. That's how it moves best. And because I'm speaking from an Ayurvedic lens, I also want to name the Vedic seasonal shift happening around this time. So when this episode goes live in early April, I'm recording this at the top of March, we're still going to be in Pisces in the Vedic calendar, okay? So that's the part of the wheel that's about release and closure and spiritual digestion. And then around mid-April, when the sun shifts into Aries season, Aries is ruled by Mars, which signifies courage and initiative and leadership. It's going to start to feel like, I'm waking up, but I'm still letting go. The spark is here, but my system is still making space for it. And honestly, that explains so much of why April feels the way that it feels, because you can sense the beginning coming, but you still might be in the ending emotionally, if that makes sense. I want you to know that you're not doing anything wrong. You're actually just living in the nuance of this season. Which brings me to what I think April is really asking of us. April is asking us to clear the altar. April is asking us to light the candle, to make room in the body, to release what's clogging or blocking our life force from flowing so that the spark can actually move through us. So the idea here is to let Pisces help you release and let Aries help you begin. As I record this in early March, it feels important to name the larger context that we're living in. Even if you're not following the news closely, we all know that we're in an intense collective moment, right? There's grief and fear and anger and exhaustion. And for sensitive people, which I'm assuming is most of you here, it's very easy to swing between urgency and shutdown, right? Between wanting to show up for everything and not being able to get off the couch. I have felt that too. And what I keep coming back to is this: your nervous system is not failing you. It is responding rightfully to conditions that were never designed to be sustainable. Self-care is part of collective care. Regulation is part of collective care. Tending your steadiness is not separate from the work. It's what makes the work possible. So spring in this context, to me, it isn't just about personal renewal. It's about finding a sustainable fire, right? Not a wildfire, not burning yourself down in the process of showing up, but a steady ember, which, as we'll come back to in a moment, is exactly what today's energy is about. Now, before we continue, I just want you to notice if anything stirred up heat or tension, as I said, any of that. And maybe you let your shoulders drop. Maybe you unclench your jaw. Maybe you take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. And I want you to know that you are allowed to care deeply without carrying everything at once. Just let your body register that. Okay, so let's return to the inner landscape. And quick sidebar, if you are listening right now and you're feeling like, yes, this is exactly the conversation that I need, I do offer something called a Soft Alchemy session. This episode is sort of like the collective version of that experience, but in a one-on-one container, we personalize this tending even further, and we work specifically with what's unfolding in your body and in your life, but more on that later. Let's talk about April's emotional weather for a moment. In my experience, April is not the month where everything is fully activated and in full swing. April is the in-between. You know, it's more like your system slowly coming back online when you sort of start to notice like, oh, I think I want to open the windows today. Or, oh, I think I want to actually like get up and stretch a little longer today. Or, oh, that thing that felt tolerable in January actually doesn't feel quite right anymore. You know, it comes in layers through small realizations, through subtle shifts, through, you know, those little internal clicks. And I've noticed that it usually shows up in a few familiar ways. One is the desire to move again. And I don't mean that in like a capitalist, patriarchal grind culture way, but I mean that in a more embodied, like, I need to stretch kind of way. right? I want to get some air. I want to tune back into my body. And that might look like gentle stretching when you wake up, as I mentioned, or a slow walk around the block. It could look like dancing. It could look like sitting in the sunlight with your bare feet in the grass just to ground yourself. Nothing performative and nothing that needs to become a production, but just these small grounding moments that slowly wake you back up and moments that become rituals that you can return to. The second thing is the urge to clear things out. And now this one is really personal to me because I feel like I go through it at least 2 or 3 times a year. And it can be literal, like wanting to clean a drawer or reorganize a corner of your space. But it can also be emotional, relational, or internal. I always say that spring has a way of making it very obvious what has gone stale and what's been hanging around longer than it needs to. Spring really helps you to see what your system is ready to let go of. And the third thing is the pull toward truth. After the long season of reflection that we had in the winter, you might feel called to name or express something that you've been holding in because you've had enough time to sit with it and realize, I don't need this anymore. And this isn't true to who I am anymore. Letting yourself be real about what is and is not working, what your mind, body, and spirit are asking for. This is part of the work that we do in the spring. This makes me think about how toward the end of last year, I was carrying a lot of fear around stability. A lot of fear around money and where it was going to come from and timing and whether what I'm building would actually support me. Nothing in my life was collapsing per se, but nothing was really resolving quickly either, right? And so I noticed this temptation to rush, to force clarity and to push outcomes, to try everything that I could just so the discomfort would end. But the deeper work was staying in the truth of that discomfort, rather than bypassing it, really staying present with it and staying connected to the things that I could attend to, staying with the belief that movement was happening, even when it didn't feel tangible yet. And we spoke about this in episode 1 about stillness, right? And as I said back in episode 1, the art of winter the art of winter. The art of stillness is a winter teaching. And it's also a spring teaching. It's a lifelong teaching, honestly. But in the context of spring, as the season is shifting, it takes time for the warmth to fully return, right? And growth happens slowly at first. The trees don't just all of a sudden have these full blooms on them. You notice little buds at first, right? And then they open up and show their full form. So if you're in a season where you feel like you're waiting or things are moving really slowly, it just might not be your time to speed up just yet. This might be a moment where you choose to move honestly instead of quickly, where you figure out what moving honestly even means for you right now. So before I started recording this episode, I actually pulled a card for us from my Soft Inquiries digital oracle deck just to see what wanted to anchor this threshold. And the card that came through was Steady Ember. And I'll make sure to display it on the screen for those of you who are watching on YouTube. But I really had to smile when I scrolled upon it because it just speaks so directly to everything that we've been talking about. The card says, Your inner fire doesn't need to blaze to sustain you. It lives in the small, steady returns to breath, to boundaries, to what keeps you connected. Tend the warmth that lasts. And that feels like spring, doesn't it? I think that in a year where we are planting seeds, in a season that's about both releasing and beginning at the same time, steady ember truly feels like the medicine. So let this be part of the container for the season. Let it be a gentle orientation point that you can return to. And for anybody curious about the deck, it is available on the Soft Alchemy shop at srlwellbeing.com. And it is designed so that you can use it on your phone or on your tablet, or you can even print it out. I actually have a friend who is laminating there so that they can use it with their friends, which I love. But even if you don't have the deck, you can borrow the essence of this card, right? So let it be your guidepost this week. And if you have another deck nearby, whether it's mine or one that you love, I want you to feel free to pull a card with today's soft inquiries in mind. And after this episode, you can just sit with whatever comes up. With steady ember as your guidepost, let's take that into the body for a moment. Place a hand somewhere grounding, your heart, your belly, wherever feels most alive, and ask yourself just two things. Where do I feel expansion right now? And where do I feel contraction or heaviness? Just notice. Let your breath soften around whatever you find. Spring asks you to clear a little space and let something true take root. And that clearing isn't always about your home. Sometimes it's a relationship, a role, a habit, even a version of you that's run its course. So I want to leave you with this soft inquiry this week. Where are you still negotiating with something that might already be complete? This week, your practice is simple. Reflect on this question. Perhaps you journal about it, and then choose one thing to complete or one thing to finally let go of. Additional practice suggestions are in the YouTube description and in the show notes. If today felt like the kind of tending you want to continue, I have two ways to support you. The Soft Alchemy session is a 90-minute one-on-one container where we slow down, we listen to your body, and we alchemize what's actually unfolding in your life. This includes a personalized integration guide and a custom card pull from my Soft Inquiries digital oracle deck. And if you want support through a whole season, the 4 to 6 session Soft Alchemy coaching container is exactly that. It's ritual rooted, it's sustained, and I'll be alongside you along the way. Both start with a free alignment call at srlwellbeing.com/sessions, and that link is also in the YouTube description and in the show notes. So let's take one more breath together just to seal this in. Inhaling the truth that you're allowed to rise at your own pace. And exhaling the pressure to have everything figured out. Thank you so much for spending time in this threshold with me. May your ember stay steady, and may this season teach you the beauty of slow awakening. I'll see you in the next episode.